And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for jumping on for another ATS University. You're probably recognizing the voice by now. My name is Zach Allison. I'm the Market Development Manager for ATS. I manage all of our national accounts across Canada and also our market development team that works with your engineering firms, your architectural firms to help you, get set up on the tool, help get your entire firm set up and show you how you can share your master, share your projects, and download all the products that are available there. On the products that are available there, we are doing a deep dive training session on the pivot panel, which is a pump control panel available to be selected on the SpecTool, paid for by our lovely manufacturers and longtime partners, Zoeller, out of the US. And with us today is, I believe, head of the training, pump guru, whatever the title is, but Jeff Sloss from down in Louisville. Thanks for joining us again, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to sharing some info about pivot control panels.
Yeah, knower of all things.
I don't know about that. I'm actually the controls sales manager. We led a team of product development people that in engineering and marketing that developed a lot of these electronics and products, and now we're in full on sales mode. So I've switched to kind of more of a sales and support type of role.
Yeah, years. I heard about this product for like years before it actually launched,
Yeah.
and it's made a big wave so far. So I know there's a couple of unique attributes to it that I'm sure we'll cover. Before we dive into that, just a bit of heads up for those on the call. As with all the ATS University sessions, this is going to be recorded, so we have everyone muted upon entry. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat and QA fields as we go. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to raise them there. I'll bring them up to Jeff as we get to kind of the end of a section, end of a slide, and make sure that we get actionable answers for you. If this is your first time at an ATS University session, we run three types of sessions. We either have a application-specific discussion where we are diving into the products that fit, say, a high-traffic environment or an office or a commercial facility, and we might talk about the different attributes that help those fit into those applications. We do a lot of approved CEUs as well, where it's a little bit more generic because all the accreditations require it to be less brand specific. But we do have some of those sessions that are available, and you can either request those sessions for your firm or watch the previously recorded sessions, and I'll show you how you can find that at the end. And then we run what we call our product sessions, which are personally my favorite. We will do either a sizing guide. We've done pump sizing sessions, water heater sessions. We might talk about the nitty gritties of backflow prevention, how and why you select certain backflow preventers. And that's why today we're going to get into the depths and details of the pivot panel, why there is so much time spent on the R&D, what that's affecting on your selection, and how you actually go about adding it to your projects. So with all those details, I'll pass it over to you, Jeff. Thanks for joining us today.
All right. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm assuming you can see my intro slide for the pivot presentation. Yes?
Yes, sir. It's looking good.
All right. Great. So yeah, we're gonna talk about these control panels. These are specific to Zoeller. We make them, and we'll just go to this first slide here. I really just want to cover, maybe you guys have a general idea of what a control panel does. I'm just kind of assuming that, but panels just basically turn pumps on and off. Rather than just relying on a single switch, for example. Maybe there's more to it. Some stations, some pumps have more technology built into them, or you want a wider pumping range. There's a whole bunch of reasons why you could need a panel. But generally, the bigger pumps, the small pumps don't need panels. They typically have a little switch, and there's not much technology in them. But bigger stations are going to require panels. And what I'm trying to do here with this presentation for you is to show you why Pivot and Pivot Pro are different from other panels. And what are those main functions and important features that set it apart, just so you kind of get an idea of the applicability of them. We do have some literature and sales aids. I don't know if we have time to go through all of that, but as Zach said, just go ahead and throw questions at him, and he can forward those to me. I'd be happy to answer anything related to it. So why would Zoeller, a pump manufacturer, build control panels? First of all, we're vertically integrated. We started that years ago, where we don't just build the pumps; we build the tanks. We have a full-on plastic injection molding division in about an hour or so away. We have a full-on electronics division now in Brantford, Ontario. So that is where the pivot panels are made, or right in Canada. But I think it's like an hour or so from Toronto. Next is we really like having the autonomy and the control over our product future, because we may develop something in a pump that a panel is going to need to work with and integrate with, and that's really easy to do when you make the panel too. So we aren't relying on vendors to keep pace with us. And speaking of vendors, we want to protect our innovations. So we've often over the years come up with great ideas, and whether it's in pumps but mostly in panels, we've passed that innovation along and say, hey, build our panels this way. And then we find out a year or so later, they're selling that innovation in the panels they sell to our competitors. So, it's just a way to maybe keep it in-house for at least a little bit longer. This slide shows you the panels that we've sold for years and years, and that you might be used to. These are very simple panels. These were made by a company called SJE Rhombus, SJ Electro Rhombus. They were our primary panel supplier for many, many years. And I'm not picking on them here. This is just a representative of a typical panel. So these are both single phase panels. You see a duplex on the left and a simplex on the right. If we look at that panel on the left, a typical panel will have, in single phase anyway, we'll have those circuit breakers in the upper left, the pump contactors in the upper right. You've got your a lot of terminal screws there for inputs like float switches and power. You've got some output for dry contacts. And then in the middle there, you see a circuit board that has LEDs and paddle switches and relays and that kind of thing on it. And I point that out because while that is a circuit board, there's nothing smart about it. And I'm not picking on this company. I'm just saying there's two different kinds of circuit boards. You have circuit boards that are simply a collection point for smaller electronic devices. And then you've got circuit boards that have logic and computer chips and Wi-Fi chips and all the rest. One of those circuit boards you could call smart, and the other one would just be dumb, I guess, for lack of a better term. But it just doesn't have the ability to make any decisions. So anyway, those are our old panels. And those were basic panels. So if you needed a change to a panel, this is the way the control panel industry works. And this is how everything works, even today, except for pivot. In the rest of the industry, if you need something different than the standard panel, you go through a sheet like this and you say, okay, well, I want that panel, but I need to add this and subtract this, and I want that option. And you check these boxes and you come up with a new price, you come up with a new part number, and then you submit it and have it built. That's just the way it works. If you can get away with a stock panel that's on the shelf, great, but otherwise you're waiting some number of weeks for that panel. What we decided to do was, now that we have technology and microprocessors and it's all relatively a lot less expensive than it used to be, why not leverage that into a panel? So what we did is we took all those features that used to be, all those things that used to be options, not all of them, but most of them, the most popular ones, and we just made those standard features in the panel. Now, on an old panel, since everything was mechanical, that would mean the panel gets huge, because each one of those features meant another mechanical device or whatever going into the panel that has to get wired in, and et cetera, et cetera. But the more of those things that you can do electronically with transistors and diodes and whatever, and a microprocessor making decisions, that doesn't take up any more space. And frankly, you've already paid for the microprocessor, so anything additional you add that processor can do is almost free. So make most of our options standard, which is what the slide here says. That's also going to reduce the number of panels that are out there because there isn't as many variations of panels. So we went to support our 200 or so pumps and all the pump model variations, it took us 3,600 different control panel variations to cover all that. Now with Pivot and Pivot Pro, it's a little over 100 panels. That's it. And what I like to tell people is when I was in the pump world selling and servicing pumps, I owned a small company in the Chicago suburbs, we didn't keep panels on the shelf. Now, not because I didn't want to, but because I never knew what I was going to need. My brother, who does kind of a similar thing as my past life, he is able to keep the panels that he knows he's going to use on the shelf because the panels cover so many more pumps and variations. So the point is, you pare that down to a much smaller population of panels, and now you can start putting them on the shelf. Lots of problems and complaints in the field for typical standard control panels. We feel like we've fixed most, if not all, of those problems that people complained about over the years. We'll look at a few of them in a minute. And none of this would be worth even talking about if the price tripled. So we had to maintain the price. So we maintained basically a price that's very, very close to the foundational basic panels in the old style panels, even though they have all these additional features. We also kept the panels small, or relatively small. They didn't get huge. If you built a panel mechanically with what's packed into these control panels, they'd be 4 times the size, or they'd be huge. And then the last bullet there, we're prioritizing running the pumps. And we're not going to get exactly into the meaning of that right this second. I'll point it out later, what I mean by that. But remember that I made it big, I made it bold, made the font larger. And those are all good reasons to emphasize that is the most important thing that we accomplished with these panels, prioritizing running pumps. And I know without an explanation, that kind of sounds silly because, of course, control panels prioritize pumps, but I'm going to show you why they do not, most of them.
Yeah, they try to prioritize, I guess, keeping the panel running. But no, you mentioned the number of SKUs that you went down, and I will just say from an ATS perspective, building out our SpecTool and having the pump aligned to the control panel and trying to make it easy on engineers, we thank you for that. I remember going through, the giant, like 10, 15 pages of the panel to pump correlation charts.
Right.
And you showed all the options. As mentioned just before you jumped on, there was a couple of the guys on the call that, when ATS first joined with Zoeller nearly a decade ago, they were some of the first people I took the pumps out to, and we were doing our first projects together, and sitting staring at that page with all those different options, trying to figure out what the heck they need. And now it's so significantly easier. Saves a lot of time when trying to figure out the right selection.
Right, exactly. So when you go to the Pivot and Pivot Pro, these are our kind of the entry level Pivot and the next level Pivot Pro. Those are the panels. The way they all kind of look the same, really, because on Pivot there may be 30 different pivots, and on Pivot Pro there's 70 or 80 different Pivot Pros, but they all kind of look just like this. The variations at that point just become whether they're single phase or 3-phase, or what amp range of pumps they're for, because the amp range of the pump changes what size overload or what size breakers you have. So other than that, that's what the variations are, not features. So we can just look at this real quick. On the left is Pivot. So those are going to be your most entry level panels, but it's single phase only. You can see there's no LCD or menu system. You cannot connect it to Z Control, which is our cloud, and the settings are not as simple. You can change all the settings. It's just not as convenient and easy to change. So that's on the left. That's Pivot. Pivot Pro on the right is mostly what I'm going to talk about. That's by far our most popular panels, and it's also what I'm going to switch to on our screen here. The in a minute when I get through a few more slides here. So Pivot Pro, you can buy that either in single phase or 3-phase. It has the LCD menu. It has features like seal fail and thermals. That's in addition to the features that Pivot has. So when I'm going through some of the features in a little bit, all the features apply to both platforms, Pivot and Pivot Pro. The extra features on Pivot Pro are seal fail and thermal. Pivot Pro, you can connect with a gateway to our Z-Control cloud, and the setting changes are much easier because you've got a menu, an LCD screen with 4 buttons that navigate you through a menu. It's very simple to change settings.
So the question that I'll just kind of get out of the way right away, especially when you mentioned the Z-Control. The regular question that comes up anytime that we're doing a pump these days, or at least most of the time, can it integrate in the BAS? Do both the Pivot and the Pivot Pro have, like an aux dry contact that can integrate into a BAS system? Or is it just the Pivot Pro that has
that? So the integration with BAS or any sort of building maintenance system, that's going to be done using dry contacts. The Z-Control is only Pivot Pro. So dry contacts are an open enclosure system that changes state when there's alarms, when there's pump runs, that kind of thing. That's what a BMS system wants to see. Integration with or using Z-Control, you get many, many more features and visibility and remote control of the Pivot's panels. So so it's the Z-Control and BMS are not what are integrated. Hopefully that makes sense. This form is just a chart of part numbering. We use a 5 digits, a dash, and 4 digits to number all of our panels. It used to be a 10-4 numbers, and it meant nothing. These part numbers that we've started using a few years ago, you basically can discern from the first 5 digits what the device is, what the thing is that has that number. So it's really helpful when you're trying to make sure you have the right panel, or you're ordering the right panel, or you've been confirmed a certain part number. You can see, as long as you use this chart, you can see what the whoops, I went the wrong way. What the panel, how the panel's built. So amps, phase, the platform, whether it's duplex, simplex, or reversing, all those things. So I just want to point that out. On the inside of the panels, you're going to have all the manufacturing data, the FCC stickers, the agency stickers. You've got an envelope with a schematic in it. There's another schematic loose in the carton. And then also in that envelope, we started including, just a couple months ago, we started including fuses, a fuse holder, and a jumper wire, just to help out the customers and the people in the field. And then the other thing I would point out is in the upper right corner there of the door, you'll see a sticker, and this is what the sticker looks like. What we're doing is we're prompting the contractor, whoever's installing it, to write down part numbers, horsepower, measure site information, the voltage, the amps, the phase, the measured pump amps when they run a pump. Basically, they're creating a benchmark and a date, and that's really going to help the next guy that comes along and is trying to diagnose a problem. If he has that benchmark and that basic information, it's super helpful to the next person. So that's just one of the things. And then that QR code takes you directly to a page on our website that has all the data for the panels. So instructions, spec sheets, technical diagrams. There's even a what we call a quick reference guide, which is really nice because it goes through a very abbreviated installation process but then it also goes into quick troubleshooting, flow chart, wiring setups. It's just really nice. Just a 2-page thing, and it shows you all the basic info. It condenses the 15-page instructions down to 2-page. This is a schematic. No magic here, just a simple schematic. This is probably the most basic one, but there's a dozen or maybe 16 of these for the various panels. The way I talk about pivot is I separate it into 4 categories. This seems to help people a lot. So we'll just go into these 4 categories. I want to keep moving just because I don't know how much time we have, and we want to allow for some questions. But so that first category of data recording, all the things that you would expect a panel with some extra options, the most basic options, which would be elapsed time meters, that's measuring how much time the pump has been on, uptime of the panel, number of counters, so how many times the pump has cycled, all those kinds of things are built right into the panels. It's recording everything. Now, of course, if you remember a few slides ago, the Pivot Pro has a little screen, so it's a lot easier to see all that information. You can scroll through a menu and you can see all that info. It is being recorded on the Pivot, the one without the screen, but you got to pull it off with a thumb drive. So it's just a little less convenient than what a Pivot Pro would have available. And if you went online, if your Pivot Pro was online, you'd see even more information. You'd see durations, reset counts, and just a lot more information. And you'd see a complete alert history for the panel. So, when you walk up to a panel that's in alarm, you're going to see what the alert is. You'll figure that out. We'll look at that in a second. But once you clear it, that information's gone. If the panel's connected to the cloud, that's all retained in the cloud. So you have an ongoing history of all those alerts. One of the biggest differences with pivot panels is their ability to do diagnostics. Now, you can't do diagnostics if you don't have what we would call a computer these days. I mean, it's just a microchip, but we've got a whole bunch of firmware, which, by the way, we wrote everything. So all of that was done in-house. We did all of the communications protocols, the web, the cloud, the whole cloud system, the app, everything is ours. So we're not renting systems. We're not having anybody else build anything or write firmware for it. It's all done in-house. And, the point of that is we were able to do as much as we wanted it to do. When we give you a diagnostic, most panels are just going to basically be able to give you a high water alarm. They aren't giving you all the dozen or more alarms that we're doing. We're gonna tell you, or not you, but the contractor. We're gonna tell that contractor, hey, you left the alarm or the HOA, which is what tells the panel whether to be in hand, off, or auto mode. Normally, you'd be in auto when you leave because you're letting the panel listen to the switches as to whether or not to turn the pump on and off, right? So if you put it in hand, or let's say you put it in off because you're servicing something, and you do your thing and you clean up the site and you close the door and you leave, you forget to put it back in auto, that's a bad day. And that happens all the time because the next phone call that contractor gets is somebody pretty upset with the sewage that's backing up in the basement because they left it off. What we did is we said, well, we can't turn it back to auto because that's not a safe thing to do. We don't know we can't do that automatically because the panel doesn't know if it's safe to do that. But we can give an alarm. So we give an alarm after 4 hours that hey, somebody left this panel off. Is it supposed to be off? And they can override that alarm if they don't want the alarm and that kind of thing. But the point is, we're giving all of these alarms. It's a smart enough panel to know that something's wrong. If the pump runs continuous, the default setting is 20 minutes. If that pump is on for 20 minutes for any reason, it's gonna trip an alarm. Now, maybe 20 minutes isn't the right number. So that's you can change that to whatever you need, whatever the contractor needs it to be. Maybe it needs to be shorter or longer. But and then other things, tripped overload, bad contactors, the seal fails and thermals. Those are all things that we can detect, and we want to be able to detect because we want the customer, the homeowner, the property owner to know that's wrong. All right, I'm going to switch to, if I stop my sharing, am I on full screen, or how, can you do that, Zach?
Yes, sir. You are full screen.
Okay. So if I go to my, panel here, so this is one of the 3-phase panels. This is a Pivot Pro, as you can tell, because it has a screen. We know it's 3-phase, by the way, because we can see a transformer up here, and we can see overloads here. That's kind of the telltale signs of a 3-phase panel. We make Pivot Pro in single phase also, but this one's 3-phase. I'll point out that I have my horn, my alarm out here. It's not wired, so it won't scare it won't scare me.
You don't want it going
won't
off.
Make me jump. And then the other thing I'll point out is why we have a transformer. If you're bringing in 3-phase power right here, which I'm not, obviously, I've just got it plugged in for demo purposes. But if I'm bringing in 3-phase power right here to run my pumps, 3-phase power can't run my electronics and my globe and everything. I need single-phase power for that. That's what the transformer does. This transformer makes single-phase power, 115 volt power for my electronics. That's all it's for. All right. So what do I mean by float faults? If I turn on these little buttons over here are representing my floats. So normally these 4 represent the 4 floats that are down in the tank. Okay. So if I turn my stop float on, that's the lowest float. You can see this LED turned on. Is that in my screen? Okay. Yeah. So stop LED turned on, and then my lead float came up, and I don't know if you could hear that, but the contactor pulled in. So now the pump is running. Now the water goes down. So the lead float turns off, the stop float turns off, pump turns off. Real simple. Next time I do it, it'll go to the other pump. That's what a duplex panel does. However, and old panels do that too. It's the same operation. That's basic operation of a duplex panel. But on an old panel, I usually ask people in the room, I know I won't get an answer necessarily. But if I didn't have a stop float working, if my stop float got stuck, so it stayed down, and the only thing that came on was my lead float. So my stop float got stuck down, my lead float comes up. I ask people in the room, what happens? And they all say, well, a pump turns on and the alarm turns on. And the answer is nothing happens.
Yeah, the pump will just continue running, right?
No pump turns on. No, if you do this on the old panels, no pump is running, because the stop float, it's a relay-based system. There's no smarts to it. So this has to be up and this has to be up for a pump to turn on. If only this is up, your pump is not going to turn on. And most people don't realize how susceptible they are to a pump, to a big $50,000 lift station not running properly because of that one problem. Now I'm just using this as one example. There's many examples for float faults, but let's just use that example. This float, the bottom float, is stuck off, and I only turn on my lead float. I don't know if you heard that, but the pump turned on. That's huge. No other panel does that. This is the only panel that does that. The pivot line of panels. So the pump is running right now, which is a big deal. The horn is going, the globe is blinking, and this stop LED, which is the lowest float, that float number 1, is blinking red. And the screen says alarms, float 1. I'm being told exactly what's wrong with the station. And if this was connected to the cloud, my phone and my text and my push notifications are blowing up with float 1 faults. I know exactly what's wrong. This float is stuck. So now I can turn it off. It won't turn off immediately. By turning it off, that means the float went down, and we don't want to short cycle the pump. So we add 10 seconds, and then it turns off. That's just so we don't short cycle the pump real quick with a fast moving float up and down. Now you notice the alarm is latching, staying in place. We're going to clear that out. It stays in place until somebody comes and does this, which is I'm holding the silence toggle down and clearing that out. The reason that's important is so often somebody's called out to a site and they get there and there's no evidence of what was wrong. They have no way of diagnosing it. So we're giving people that extra information to be able to diagnose a problem. And now I can go up through a bunch of other float faults, but it's kind of beyond the scope of this intro. I'll just go back to our PowerPoint here.
So that's what you meant when you said, the pivot series prioritizes running pumps.
Absolutely.
Even if there is, all those other float faults that you were talking about, you're still going to get the number one important piece, which is a pump turning on and pumping out that water.
That's right.
Versus, some of the older technology where all you're getting in is an alarm, maybe a second high level alarm that's like, hey, there's really a big problem here. That's all you're getting from some of those other panels. Whereas this is like, okay, there's a problem, we fixed it, but don't forget about this problem.
Yeah, so we're actually overcoming the actual problem that is present. And yeah, you touched on something. So sometimes the stop float gets stuck, but sometimes other floats get stuck. So let's say stop and lead, or just lead got stuck. The panel's able to kind of sort that all out and make decisions based on what it does know. And every once in a while, a wise guy says, well, what if none of the floats are working? I can't help you there. There's nothing we can do about that. But we can work with what inputs we do get and try to make the best decision possible to keep the property from sustaining any damage. And that's the whole goal. Okay, back to our PowerPoint. You're seeing my PowerPoint, right? Good. So configurability. A simplex panel can only ever be a simplex, but a duplex panel can be a simplex, it can be a duplex, alternating, or it can be a lead lag situation with a settable ratio. I'll explain that in a second. People might say, oh, duplex and alternating, that's the same thing. And it kind of is, but what we're distinguishing between is a duplex panel. If the third float comes up, you expect that the second pump to also run. So they're now running simultaneously, which is fine. That's the way duplex panels work. But we added alternating just as a way of saying, you know what? There are situations out there where you never want two pumps to run at the same time. And we've been given many examples of this. So if you choose alternating instead of duplex, when that lag float, that third float comes up, the assumption is there's one pump running. Well, one pump running isn't taking care of business because now the third float came up. If the third float comes up, we're going to go, okay, maybe there's something wrong with that pump that's running. We're going to turn it off and we're going to turn the other pump on. So that's how alternating works. And it'll kind of go through that process until somebody calls attention to it. But there'll be an alarm, etc. But the point is you're not running simultaneous pumps. And then the lead, what that means is we used to sell what was called a lead lag selector switch. And that was an option on control panels. All that did is it said, okay, pump A is the pump I want to run every time. Pump B is just there in case pump A isn't keeping up and the third float, the lag float comes up. Then both pumps can run. Well, the problem with that type of setup is pump B never gets a cycle. If everything is working the way it's supposed to, pump A gets cycled all the time and pump B sits dormant. Dormancy kills pumps. So we thought, let's give you not just a way to do lead lag, but let's do it usefully where you can include an exercise cycle for that second pump. So by default, all panels come as a 1-to-1 ratio, but you can change that ratio to whatever you want. So just by way of example, if it was in my own backyard, I had a duplex station. I don't want my pumps to wear evenly because I want one to wear out sooner than the other, so that the second pump that hasn't worn out still has plenty of life until I can get the first pump replaced. I want to minimize the risk that they both perhaps fail at the same time. So to do that, I'm going to set my station in my backyard, and I'm making this number up, 15-3. So pump A is going to run 15 times, and then the next 3 cycles will be pump B. Pump B is getting exercise, but pump B is also not being worn out. It's being worn out 5 times less frequent or less fast than pump A is. Hopefully that made sense. It's a settable ratio for alternating. Other configurability, you can make it a 3 or 4 float system. You can do the float order right from the menu if you have to change float order. The horn and the globe, you can choose between latching and active. Latching meaning it'll persist until somebody acknowledges it. Active meaning it's active while the condition is there, and it goes away if the condition goes away. A good example of that is my overload. My overload trips and I walk up to it and reset the overload, the alarm goes away because the condition went away. There's other modifications you can do within the menu system on the Pivot Pro or through a USB on the Pivot. If I didn't mention it, that's the way you change settings on a Pivot, because it doesn't have the nice convenient menu. You would use a thumb drive, and there's a USB slot on the interface where you put a certain kind of file on the thumb drive, stick it in the USB slot, and it updates your settings. There's instructions for how to do that in the documentation. Then online, there's some ways to change certain configurations. You can silence and you can reset. If we have a couple minutes, I'll just show what that screen looks like at the end.
We still got say 10-15 minutes left.
Okay.
And I think the wild part that you mentioned earlier, like all that configurability within the standard product, not as a custom sheet that has to be built through and all that stuff. Like
Right.
That's the wild part, right?
That was the big, not only does it reduce the variability and allow people to stock the things that they're going to be able to use all the time, it takes a lot of guesswork out of things. It takes a lot of, oh crap, I got the wrong panel. I got to send this one back and have a different one set out. I can't tell you how many times somebody goes, I needed to order this with, such and such feature. And what our favorite answer is? You already have it. It's included in that panel, and people are so happy because they don't have to swap out a panel. All right, so just a couple problem-solving things. We talked about stuck and bad float switches. We're going to try to overcome that. Pump is stuck on. How did we overcome that? How did we solve that problem? We have a continuous run timer. Latched alarms. They're not, the alarm condition or explanation of the alarm isn't going to necessarily disappear just because the alarm goes away. We want it to persist so that you know about it and can potentially take care of that. You can turn duplex into a simplex in 6 seconds. What do I mean by that? People always complained, the field guys would always complain, man, if I got a pump down and I got to turn pump 2 off or pump 1 off temporarily, and I'm going to come back in a week and replace that pump, I have to rewire the switches so I don't get an alarm every other cycle, which is true. That's what you had to do. With a Pivot, though, you just turn one of the pumps off and it knows to act as a simplex. It does not give you the false alarms every other cycle because it can't run a pump. So it's got a smart HOA. If I turn the HOA to off while I'm servicing it, I get the alarm after a certain amount of time, and I can adjust what that amount of time is. I also have an alarm, I have a feature for hand. So if I turn the pump to hand, because I'm trying to pump a tank out, maybe the switches are stuck or whatever, I can still run the pump. I can turn it on manually right from the panel. That's called hand, just another word for on. That's why it's called an HOA, hand off auto. So hand or on. What happened was in the past, people would forget. They'd get distracted, go to lunch, whatever the case is. They forgot the pump was on, and they'd walk away, and that pump would burn out. And then somebody tries to claim a warranty, and you know how that goes. So instead, what we do is we turn it to hand, and after 5 minutes, the pump turns off. If you need to turn it on again, you're just turn it on hand again. But the point is, and you can turn it off anytime you want, but the point is it's not going to sit there and just run continuously because you forgot. So the point of all this is we don't want the tech to try to guess what the problem is. We want to take a lot of the mystery of the diagnosis out of the equation, and we very much have solved that problem. We want to make sure also that people understand a couple things. When you're talking to a contractor, I don't know if you guys talk to contractors directly or not, but when you're answering questions about the panel, people need to know in the back of their mind, this panel behaves differently than a panel you've been used to. So if you walk up to this panel, it's installed and the pumps are there, everything's there, and you start lifting switches and you don't do so in order, both up and down, the way water would lift them up and down, the panel is going to give you an alarm. It's going to give you fits because it's going to start reacting to that, because if you lift switch 2 before switch 1, that's illogical, and the panel is going to make a big racket because everybody's used to being able to do that. I'm going to lift one float at a time and just make sure that my inputs are working. You can't do that with this. Well, you can, but you're going to get alarms. So just something to think about. And then the other thing is that continuous run alarm. You want to make sure you're thinking about what is the cycle time of this pump in this application. Is 20 minutes appropriate? Maybe it isn't most of the time, and you got to change it. And then I would say the third thing you got to think about when you're putting in a panel like this, if you're using the Z control features, that gateway, the little box, I don't know if you noticed it on the inside of the door of my panel, that's the piece that has the Wi-Fi chip in it. That has to be within the Wi-Fi range of your router. So if your panel's not going to live its life within the Wi-Fi range, that little gateway does. So you may have to run a Cat5 cable between where the panel lives and where the gateway needs to live. And of course, you do not want to run a data cable inside of a conduit that has power. So those are things you got to think about ahead of time. Zach, I'll let you interrupt me whenever you want, but this is the Z control interface. That on the left, that's what the web interface looks like. I won't go into any detail just because I don't think we have the time, but and then on the right, that's the mobile app, what it looks like when you're looking at a Pivot Pro panel.
So yeah, we do have about 5 to 10 minutes left, depending on how much time we have left at the end. We did have a question come in, which I think we can likely cover when I get to kind of showing the products on SpecTool, but they bring up I still think a point worth mentioning now, because we might cover it as we close up here. Even though we've reduced, the SKUs that you mentioned, I think it was from, was it 3,600 or 360 down to 100 or so? That's still 100 and so different panels. Mm-hmm. It's still challenging to select. What are the most important aspects to look at when trying to select the right panel for your pump? That might be something that we can cover.
Well, I'll make it really easy. If you know your pump model, if it's a Zoeller pump model, we have a panel selection guide that tells you exactly which panel to use. So you know your pump model, you just look it up in the panel selection guide, and there it is. There's the panel's part number. So it's pretty simple. You got to know whether you've got a simplex or duplex situation, but our part number dictates voltage, phase, and amps. And you just read across the line, go across the road. Do you want a Pivot or a Pivot Pro? There's your part number.
Yeah, real simple. There's that handy guide that will, once you have your pump, it'll recommend the panel. And then similarly, if you are selecting it on the ATS SpecTool, you can use our link to the Zoeller sizing system, size your pump, select the pump, and then the very next step, it'll recommend the appropriate panel for you as well. So those are 2 easy ways if you are using the Zoeller pump and Zoeller panel. And I think you covered it as well there. It really comes down to simplex, duplex. What is the amperage of the pump? And what are the features that you're looking for? That's really how you're going to decide.
Power. Yeah. Whether it's single phase, 3-phase, and which, like if it's 3-phase, it covers, let's see, 200, 230, 460. So it's multi-voltage, and the transformer is multi-voltage too. So they're all built the same. That's how you get the variability down.
Yeah, I'll let you finish up for the next 5 minutes or so.
Okay. So yeah, you can see on the cloud, once you land the gateway and the Pivot Pro in the cloud. You can see right here, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving. Those are the two tiles for those two devices. You probably won't need to open a gateway just because there's not really a whole lot to see. It's the pivot that you would open. You'd click the view button. This is just my PowerPoint, not a live screen. You click that and you'd end up getting a whole page of information. I could switch to that. Let me just finish this out here. That's the mobile screen. So these go very many pages deep. But everything you can do online on our webpage, you can do in the mobile app. So yeah, I mean, you're just monitoring, you're configuring, you can silence, reset, troubleshoot, get all your alerts, all that kind of thing. There's a lot of different assets or literature out there. You've got this sales sheet does a nice job of really packing a lot of information onto one page. You got Pivot on one side and Pivot Pro on the other. Gives you a good idea of the kinds of things that the Pivot accomplishes. This is just a cross-reference, but on the other side of that sheet, here's another list of features. So you can see these lines. These are the lines of demarcation. You can see right up here, this is our old panels, our old rhombus panels, and the check marks stop here at that first line of features. You go all the way down to here for the Pivot. So more than halfway down the page, and all of these features here are included in Pivot. And then you got extra features for Pivot Pro. And so it's just a nice way to compare what you're getting with each platform. On that page that you can get to through the QR code, all of these items are there. So the sales sheets, the technical sheets, the quick reference guide that I mentioned earlier, they're all very helpful. I'll dwell here for 3 more seconds, just if anybody want to take a picture of that. That's the same QR code that's inside the door on the sticker, where all those literature pieces are. Timeline's not important. Okay, questions. I know you're looking at my race car right now, but no, I didn't. It's not my race car, but I do have one like it though.
It's a dream of your race car, I'm sure.
Let's see here. All right, I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to reshare, and I'm going to share my hopefully my Pivot Pro. So we have a training center here in Louisville, and it's a beautiful training center. We built it.
I think it's still the most impressive training center I've been to.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Now, can you see my web screen there? My web browser?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you can see this says Fisherville House. That's a location in my account. So this is my account. Here's Jazz. That's my initials. Test equipment. These are the things on my desk here. Here's our training center, Center for Excellence. So I'm going to open the pivot panel that's over in the training center. And when I open that up, this is what any owner or manager of a panel would see. You've got all your information about your pumps, your HOAs, your float switches. You can scroll down this and see all the counters and durations and all that kind of thing. You can see your alert history. So every alarm or alert that comes in gets recorded here. Now it only shows 200, but you can filter and pull more out of our database. Device settings, you can name it. You can say which of your locations that device belongs in. Here's 5 things so far that you can change remotely. Remember our 20-minute continuous run timer, and you forgot to change that and you left the site and they're getting a continuous run alarm. Oh, shoot, I can silence the panel, I can reset the panel, and I can go back into my 20 minutes and change it to 5 or an hour or whatever the appropriate number is. So there's things you can change remotely like that. And then alert settings. These are all the different alarms that the panel is capable of tripping off. And you can notice up here at the top of the column, I can get them via email, text, or push notification, meaning through the app. Now, if I go to my contacts for my account, you notice it's just my email and just my mobile number. Well, if I put Zach's number in here, he's going to get it also. If I can put Zach's email, he's going to get it also. So instead of everybody on the planet being their emails and phone numbers being in the same account here, I'm going to share it. Let's say Zach also, he's the owner and he wants to get certain alarms, but only the most urgent things, not the way I want to get alarms. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click share device. I'm going to put Zach's email here. He's going to accept the invitation he gets. And then what will happen is once he accepts it, come on, this tile right here, this square tile that says Pivot Pro is going to show up in his account. And then he can just set it up the way he wants and have that tile in his account notify the email, text, and push the way he wants it.
Customize my notifications as well. That's wild. That's fantastic. Well, and I guess we'll pause here for a second, see if any questions come in. I might take over the screen share as we're waiting for any questions to come in here, because I do want to show for how to find and select the pump and the panel on the SpecTool. Obviously, they mentioned that finding the right pump and the right panel can be cumbersome. So I want to show how they can get to that. One thing I'll mention, if this is your first time at ATS University, thank you for joining us. Hope you learned a lot and come back next time. This is all associated with what we call the ATS SpecTool. It's a product configuration and product selection software that is sponsored by manufacturers like Zoeller, who put their products onto the SpecTool so that you can actually configure, get the exact model number of what you've selected, and then download it in any one of our 10 different formats. That could be brochures, submittals, schedules, manufacturer cut sheets, Revit files, various written specs, all sorts of different versions. But it's all login based. So, Jeff might be at his new engineering firm, and if he wants to, again, share, similar to how the Z Control has the ability to share your pump management, you can share your project management within the SpecTool as well. So you mentioned your brother. If your brother and you start up a new engineering firm, you can share projects back and forth. You can work on the same project, even if he's in Chicago and you're down in Louisville, no problem. And most importantly, it updates code based on where you select the project. So Chicago and Louisville might have different building codes and different barrier-free codes and different, maybe pumps that are available in different regions. All of that is embedded into the system based on the location of the project file. If you want to learn any more about either the system or those different application sessions, you can go to this Architects and Engineering tab, go down to Learning Hub, and go to our webinar recordings, and you'll see how to integrate SpecTool into your firm. You'll see information on different, how to size a pump, different applications, all those different guides. And then we also have what we call ATS templates, which is in essence recommended product based on an application, either something as big as a hospital or a long-term care facility, or as small as a standard mechanical room where you might have a sump pump integrated into that facility. Originally, this is more of a brochure and a catalog. It did give you the ability to copy that standard set of fixtures into a new project, but I'll show you shortly in a couple of minutes how much that's improved to allow for even faster and easier selection. That's the entire point of ATS, is make a selection as fast and efficiently as possible so that you are also accurate and able to download it in as many formats as possible. So once you're logged in, you can see I'm in our demo engineer account. I've got a handful of projects here. I've got some more information on my dashboard. And if I want to get started on new selection, I need to basically open a folder. So I could either open a project folder, a quick spec folder, or a master folder. The master folder is going to be, again, if we're sharing an account, repeat work that we're doing all the time. Let's say we are doing, there's a Freshie expansion all across Canada, and you have the account. You would build a standard set of fixtures for Freshie, have your approved sump pump, have your approved water heater, your approved backflow, toilets, faucets, sinks, all the emergency equipment, everything that you might need. And then when you are doing a new location, drag what you need for that specific location into a new project. So you would have your Freshie master, and then you would have Freshie at 123 Fake Street. You can also, if you just want the most rapid way to a selection, you can create a quick spec. Quick spec is not going to have a rule engine. So I mentioned barrier-free code is built into our entire system here. A quick spec, because there's no location, there is no barrier-free rule engine applied. This is just a general configuration tool now, not similar to what you were talking about during the panels, going from a smart panel to a we'll say dumb panel, less than smart panel, being all PC these days. We're not getting our rule engine applied here, but we are still getting our data rule engine. So something as simple as if we select our simplex or duplex pump option, it's going to tell you on the simplex control panel. Then you can go and select your line size, your cord length, single seal, double seal, your impellers. This is going to affect your model number, which then, as we talked about before, is going to affect anything else that comes up in what we call our fixture chain. I can also select the most popular, and we'll see the most popular version come up. And you may be thinking, well, I don't know what pump I actually need. Like you mentioned in that question, there's hundreds, thousands of pumps that are available from Zoeller. Finding the right one can be challenging. So we've integrated the Zoeller pump sizing tool right here. Create your count, size your pump. It comes back and tells you you need a 282. You can search by the model number. You can also filter down. If you know more about what you are looking for, you might know that you need a double seal, or you might know that you need a half horsepower pump. Or you can filter down by pump type or pump category. We have all sorts of filters to help you find it. So if we're looking for a grinder pump, now it's going to say, sorry, it's not working because a 282 is not a grinder pump. So I could deselect that, refresh, and now I'm going to see just the grinder pump options. And then again, if I still don't know the difference between, say, the 820 and the 771 series, I have the manufacturer cut sheets integrated into the system, so I can pop open my 71 series here, learn about the product. Is this the right pump for me? No, I'm going to check out the G820 again. Is this the right pump for me? Yes, this has all the details I'm looking for. So you've got all the sizing charts, the tables that Zoeller has on their manufacturer spec sheets going to be embedded into it there. And then, of course, you can configure. Let's go back and default back to the start. You can see we're searched by most specified. This 290 series, one of our most specified pumps on the market, of course. Let's go in. We've got this already selected. We'll hit add product. And then it's going to take us to the next step in our fixture chain. So a fixture chain is essentially products that go together. So with our pump, we're going to need a control panel. With that, we still have the old control panel because Zoeller's told us that there's still some stock. They want us to keep it up on the site. It's not discontinued yet. When it's discontinued, this would be updated and marked off. And of course, our job at ATS is keep your masters up to date. So if you have a master with the old control panel on, when that gets discontinued, someone like myself, Mo, Mel, Natalia, Phil, any of our spec team that are here to support you, they would reach out and help you reselect a new one. And our system's going to automatically let you know, hey, product's been discontinued. You should reselect this, book a time with me to help you get the right selection. So you can see I can add options for alarm panel. There's not as many options on these panels because, as we talked about during the session, these are all integrated with all the options already. We don't need to select options. They're already there. So I can add this in. It's going to update the model number as I select any options and as I configure my product. I can hit complete. And then I'll see all the products that are in my project or my quick spec. I can update labels. We can call this FP1. You can put in any notes. So if you have a particular design point, this is something I do regularly for pumps. I may say for design point 25 GPM at 20 TDH or 20 feet ahead. And then that note will be included in my download. So I'm going to check the box that says, yes, I want this product to download. We have additional information here where if you're in a larger project where you've got multiple different product groups, I could select the entire project. I could select just a single product group, or I could select a single product. So I'm going to jump back over here. We'll hit download, and then we can download it in, again, 10 something different formats. I can have my ATS submittal format, include pricing or not. If the pricing's in the system, it'll include that in the output. We can get a schedule, pump schedule, customize. I can put in all caps or not. Long spec, short spec, manufacturer spec, Revit, CSI 3-part spec, all sorts of different formats and documents that can be downloaded and put together. See, I'm running a little bit long, so I actually pre-downloaded something like this, where again, you can see I've got that CSI 3-part spec, which if you are following the master spec format, that's very popular in the US. This is a great format for that. You get a written description and then your basis of design product in the bottom. Of course, you can open, edit, copy, and paste what you need, edit, add alternatives if you need. There may not be a true alternate to the pump panel, but you could add, say, if there's other manufacturers that, obviously this is not a proprietary spec for the most part. We keep it as open as possible while being as accurate to the product. You can then edit, adjust, and put it into your own written documentation as you need. Download your Revit file. The schedule, kind of the most customized format. This is our ATS submittal format. You get multiple manufacturers on one page or multiple products on one page compared to a manufacturer spec, which can be a little bit more detailed. They work hand in hand, especially for pumps. If you're looking for the curves, then that's where in the manufacturer spec sheet format, where it's going to integrate the actual manufacturer specs with the table of contents into the selection as you go. So you can get your actual pump curves, all the different panel information, et cetera, et cetera. Finally finish off with the schedule. Schedule's great. This is one of the new formats that we came out with just when we switched to the 3.0 format. And again, if you have water heaters in here, it'd be in a different tab of a different schedule. A water heater, a backflow, a pump, they have different, headers based, and all these headers are based on the most common headers across North America. We did a big review when we were building up this format to understand, what is the information that needs to be included. So that's in the very quick version of the ATS SpecTool. One final thing I'll mention, I talked about the masters. We have that Freshie master, like I mentioned. If you have a master on your account, building it gets even easier and even faster. You can see this is my demo account, so I've got a ton of different masters in here. But let's say we're doing, if you don't have a master that has your product, then you could go to the ATS templates and utilize our templates. So if you have a Class C office, sort on down to, say, our drainage, grab your drains. I think there's a mechanical equipment if we're looking for our pump, and we can grab our unsized pump. Now, of course, this is unsized. I'm going to drag it and drop over, and then I could revise it. So if I know, I've got the 295 here again. If I just need a 294, I could revise that down and edit it as necessary. Just hit the little pencil button, and you'll edit it from your master into your approved selection within a project or a spec. So yeah, that's how easy it can be, even though there's a ton of information on different pumps that are available within the Zoeller family, and all those pumps are associated to a panel. It can still be a little cumbersome. So hopefully the ATS SpecTool makes it easier for you, helps you configure it to get the accurate model number as well as the accurate panel. And that is true for all the manufacturers within our lineup. But that was fantastic, Jeff. I learned a lot. I think we've already done this presentation before, and at least with internal training as you trained ATS. And even then, I still learn something new every day.
That's good
So
to hear.
yeah, I appreciate you spending the time with us today. I especially love the actual video halfway through showing us the actual live product and the features. That's unique. And I appreciate you spending the time with us and teaching us. And hopefully everyone on the call learned something as well.
All right. You're welcome.
All
Thanks
right.
for having me.
Enjoy the rest of the day. We'll see you again soon. Have a great day, y'all.
All right. Bye.